Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder of Streamlined Properties and the team leader of Streamlined Properties on Market, brokered by eXp Realty. Whether you are looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Our guest today on episode 14 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing is John Errico. John, I'm going to read you in, but welcome. I wanted to let you say hi before I read in your bio.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. We've talked a lot, and I'm excited to talk to you, especially with the follow-up to Ryan. Let me just get your bio out there for everybody. John, my friend, is a serial entrepreneur. He's a Yale and Cornell Law graduate and has been an investor for a long time. In 2013, he left the full-time practice of law, just like I did. We've gone through this similarities before, right? Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, exactly. To run venture-backed technology startups in California and New York, and including a company in the real estate space. And then in 2014, he began building a real estate portfolio in the New York City area. I know that spanned out to Union City, New Haven, and now also into Atlantic City. And in 2018, John and our former guest, Ryan Goldfarb, started Liberty Hudson Capital, which is where you can find them at libertyhudson.com. John, again, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so for these folks listening, why don't you tell us how you got started in real estate? Because like myself, I was a lawyer. I had been in real estate, but you found your way into real estate in an interesting way and then got obsessed with it, as I remember.
Yeah, in some way, it was the opposite of how Ryan got involved. I think Ryan got involved in a very kind of purposeful manner. I would say that I got involved in an almost accidental manner. So
that suits both of your personalities, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was living in Manhattan after I graduated from law school, and my wife, who's also an attorney, had this great job for a law firm in Manhattan. We were paying I don't know what it was, like $3,000 a month for like a shoebox. And we basically got tired of paying rent, and we said, we should buy a place. And so we started looking in Manhattan, couldn't find any place in Manhattan that was even remotely close to our budget. We looked in Brooklyn, we looked in Queens, like the Bronx, all around. And the only place that was remotely in our budget and remotely within commuting distance to where my wife worked, which is right near Grand Central, was Hudson County, like Jersey City, Union City. So we went to Union City. I had no idea anything about Union City, nothing. Walked around, found a realtor by looking at signs on, buildings. And then about 4 months after that, we had bought our first place. So we got a 2-family. I remember we bought it for $200,000, which was like our maximum budget or something like that.
Yeah.
Like we had $300,000 of student debt, or so we just had no money. So we bought it. We got it with an FHA loan, which in retrospect, I have no idea how we did that. It wasn't a 2 or 3K. It was just straight FHA.
Wow.
But the building was like falling down.
Times have changed.
Times have changed. Yeah. So we bought it. We moved into the first floor, the first unit. We rented out the second floor originally to one of my friends, and all the work that we had to do in the house, replacing the kitchen cabinets, flooring, painting, drywall, all this sort of stuff, we did ourselves. Like we watched YouTube video and we're like, we'll tackle it because we don't want to spend any money.
So let me stop you for 1 sec. So this is a while ago. Did you have any idea that you were house hacking, or was that not even a term yet?
No, I didn't even know what that was. Yeah. Later on, I discovered Bigger Pockets and started reading books about real estate, talking to people about it. But if you had asked me what an FHA loan was, even when I was applying for it, I was like, I know what the initials are. But
it's the least money down at the time that you could put.
Yeah.
But how did that pass the FHA inspection at the time? I guess it was a little bit.
Our realtor knew the appraiser basically and was like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Like that. All the power was off. There was water service. It was boarded up. All the windows were boarded up.
Oh, you really went in. And your wife was in on this with you at the time?
Yeah, at the time. She wouldn't do it now. But
yeah, you have 2 kids now. You can't do that.
Like we were really hustling. We just had no money. And we just wanted to buy something. We moved into the first floor. We rented the second floor. We ultimately started renting out the second floor in Airbnb, which was way more lucrative. This is like the Wild West of Airbnb.
That's early, though. You were early to that, too. Yeah. I know we've talked about this privately before, but it's really interesting because you were really early to house hacking and Airbnb. Was it even Airbnb at the time, or were you doing VRBO or HomeAway? That's what I used to do.
Yeah. In fact, we had started renting. My wife had started renting her place. She went to Michigan Law School. She rented her place in Ann Arbor on Airbnb in 2012, I want to say, or 2013, like really beginning of it. The only reason I knew about Airbnb was because I was living in Silicon Valley doing startups, and like Airbnb was like the real hot thing.
Right.
Startup in 2012 or whatever. And so everyone's like whispering about it. It's a big company, but it hadn't really reached that mainstream access yet. So it was like no regulations about Airbnb. Nobody really knew what it was. So we ultimately rented out the second floor. That was crazy lucrative. So we started renting out the first floor, which is where we were living. And we moved to the basement, which was
This is such a good story because I try to tell people about a 2+1, which is what you're talking about. 2 units with a basement unit that you can in New Jersey legally live in the basement. If you don't have a stove, some people will get the stove in there. But how did you, you said you fell into it, but like you guys together are really trying it all. Yeah. House hack, landlording, living in the basement, cash flowing 2 units. How did you find that you were, I think from what you said, you were both willing to do it because you knew it was going to be smart money wise.
Yeah, I think that was the big thing was when we went, the numbers were like, we were paying $3,000 a month, call it March of 2014. And then April 2014, we moved in, we were paying our mortgage plus taxes plus whatever was like $1,700 or something like that. So that alone was a huge shift. And then we were renting out the second floor for like $1,300. And then once we started doing Airbnb and we moved to the basement, we were probably making $2,000 a month or something like that above the carrying cost of the property. So and that was maybe within 6 months. So we went from paying $3,000 a month to making $2,000 a month.
Yeah, $5,000 swing.
That's like a full-time job.
Yeah, you must have felt like geniuses at that time. You must have been celebrating every night because that's just such a... Like
we were so excited about that. We bought a second house like that December. So we bought our first house in April. We bought our second house in December because we were like, this is insane. Like this is like a gold mine. So we're like, buy the second house. We got a second house. We got a third house. Like, that's how we started. Yeah.
Your first few were all in Union City, or then when did you branch out to New Haven?
We bought 3 in Union City.
All multis?
All 2 families. Yeah. Yeah. And then we were talking about it with a buddy of mine from college and telling him the same story that I just told you, like about the numbers and the cash flow and all that. And he was like, well, this is insane. Do you want to buy something with me? And we said, sure. But he didn't know New Jersey. He was from Connecticut. And we both went to Yale together in New Haven. So we can do New Haven. So we started looking there. And that's how we bought our first place in New Haven. That was a 3-family. Yeah. But we didn't do Airbnb with that. That was just a normal 3-family. Yeah.
It's really interesting because like your first area, Union City, your first was really like, this is proximity purchase, proximity and price purchase, but then you knew the area, so you got 2 more. But then what we've talked about and what I always say is you still want to go to places that you know because you're hedging your bets that you at least know the area better than others. So when you go to New Haven for the second one with a partner and you both went to college there, you start at least understand neighborhood dynamics of what's there. Were you looking for college rentals for New Haven or was it something else?
It was, I think we talked about this before about having like a thesis or like a something that you really believe in. And so the play in Union City, I mean, we knew this when we bought it, but like the play in Union City was proximity to Manhattan, like you just said.
Yeah, for sure.
The play in New Haven, for me then, and I think still now, is the universities there. So you have, Yale has like more money than almost anything in the world. And then you have 3 other universities that are there. And so all of those universities have a really vested interest in making New Haven okay. So like whether that's materializes in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, like at some point, kind of the sprawl of Yale and these other universities is going to reach all of New Haven. And like I saw it happen when I was there, like it just continued to expand. So the thesis was like, let's buy in one of these peripheral areas that we know Yale is going to expand into. So we bought in like very bad areas, but it was like on the periphery of the Yale bubble, if you will.
Yeah, very common to how Philadelphia runs. There's so many colleges in Philadelphia. We have a lot of investors who bought like in the Temple area, which like already in a year has completely gentrified differently. Totally. So were you hoping at some point that it's the university who comes to buy yours up for dorms or for just as holdovers?
What actually happened is that we were buying near a hospital and we got wind that Yale might be buying the hospital. And that did happen about a year or two after we first bought our place. And so because Yale bought it, then they had to have all their Yale people in. They had to have housing for the doctor. The doctors never lived in our house, but like the people that worked at the hospital. And so that, it used to be like a very marginal hospital, like whatever. And it became like part of the Yale New Haven health system, which is like a humongous, well-funded, like super high-tech hospital system. So that was the idea. It's like Yale's not going to like buy properties, like houses, but they'll buy stuff that's like for Yale, and then the stuff around it will automatically become much better.
Yeah. That's really, when did you know that like real estate was going to be the thing for you? Like is it before you got to New Haven, when you guys were still in Union City, or is it still?
No, it was after that. Yeah. I was working on tech startups for a while. We actually moved to New Haven, or moved to Union City. And then I left Union City to move to San Mateo. So I was like, when we bought that second house in Union City that I mentioned, I wasn't even living in Union City. My wife was there alone, basically. I was living in California, and I was really into the startup that I was doing. We had venture capital money, like we were really rocking and rolling. And then 2015, I was working on that full time. 2016, I was still hustling. And then like by 2016, we had our 3 places in Union City. We had our place in New Haven, and then we were under contract to buy 2 more places in Union City.
So it was New Haven was two family also?
That was a 3-family. Yeah.
Okay. So that's 9 doors, and then under contract on some more.
Under contract on 2 more 2-families. So another 4
you go
doors.
from 9 to 13. Yeah.
And so at that point, I wasn't really pulling any money out of the startup. It felt like it was turning into a good small business, but not like the kind of
no scale
rise that you would want. Then I was looking at the real estate stuff, and I was like, if I did this full time, like if I trade my hours for the dollars that I'm making, like I could make a lot more money than what I'm doing with my startup. And I could use my legal acumen to figure out, I could put together a fund. I could make more sophisticated kind of JV agreements with other people. I could just kind of make it like a real thing. So it was like 2016, 2017, where I transitioned away from the tech stuff into doing real estate full time. That was a big leap. I remember being very apprehensive about it. And I basically gave myself like 12 months. I was like, if I can't like make a respectable amount of money for myself and see real like traction and progress, then I would go back to law, or I would do some normal job, basically.
Yeah. And I've said the same. I think with us having law degrees, it's a little bit easier to say, okay, I know I can go back and make money as a lawyer. But for others, I think it's interesting to hear that you do need to build up so you have a runway enough to do it. And you have to give yourself a substantial amount of time. If you say, well, if I'm not successful in 3 months, of course, you're not going to be successful. Yeah. So giving yourself a year, I think, was like a fair thing. But it's a different type of money making than a salary job. So how did you decide like how much money you needed versus how much appreciation and value you had in the properties to know that you didn't have to go back?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think retrospectively, now I've sold all the properties that I used to own in Union City, and I sold all the ones in New Haven. And I definitely made way more money on appreciation.
I always say that. Nobody listens to us about this. It's like the gold mine. Yeah.
We made a lot of money in cash flow too, because we're doing Airbnb. And so that was like, we were renting out room by room, basically. We're renting out each room for $1,000 a month.
Wow.
And we had 8-9 bedrooms throughout these 2 apartments in any given house. And so we're grossing like $8K, $9K on operating costs of maybe $2K, $3K. So it's like real money times 3 or 4 different houses. So justified it where I forgot what the number that I said was, but like I wanted to at least put in my pocket $60K or $50K or something like that, because that would feel like respectable. Again, my wife is like a big law attorney, and she makes a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So like that was, my goal was something in that realm. I think it was like 50, 60K. And then I also wanted to just have traction I wanted to work with other people, have other investors, and I wanted to just buy more properties. So like in that 1 year, we went from the 3 in Union City and the 1 in New Haven we closed on the 2 that we were buying. We bought, I think it was 3 more. And then we bought another 1 in New Haven. So that like in that one,
you're over 20 at that point.
Yeah. So in those 12 months, I kind of like doubled my portfolio. And then that's when I started working more seriously with partners, because I didn't have the capital to do it on myself. So I had joint JV agreements with friends of friends, and started to make it more standardized. Where it wasn't just like business. It wasn't just me operating it. I was like, I hired like an assistant, that type of thing. So
yeah, let's go down that rabbit hole just a little. For anyone who doesn't know, JV is a joint venture. How did you structure the joint ventures, especially with friends? Because it can get dicey if you're not on the same page. I know you and I know Ryan, and I know you guys really are going to make sure, like myself, that like we're all on the same page before we JV. Yeah. But I think a lot of people go into a JV agreement like, you know, balls to the wall, and then they're like, oops. Yeah. How did you structure those JVs so that you knew like the relationships would be okay and that the agreement was tight and the properties were good and agreed on? Because I think that's what a lot of people struggle with when they run out of capital or don't have enough capital to start.
Yeah. So I think the key was that the people that I invested with were people that I knew personally, and like they probably trusted me more than they trusted the analytics of the deal. They liked me. But to be honest, like the first couple deals that I cut were, in retrospect, not at all advantageous to me because
that's smart though.
What we did was like, we said, say we had to put up $100K or $150K or something like that to down payment on a property and renovation costs or whatever. So we would just structure where like I would put in 75, they would put in 75, and then we get half and half. But which sounds fair, but I ended up doing all the work. So like it'd be me putting together the deal, it'd be me running all the renovations.
But I mean, part of that is you wanting to make good on the JV because they gave you money. Like that makes sense to me. And I think it's also, it was important that you didn't do JVs until you had those at least 9 doors or at least the first 6 doors with just you and your wife. So you can say, this is how much money we're making. That makes a friend who already trusts you say, okay, now I trust you, but also here's the metrics from doing six doors of Airbnb. And I think that's maybe what people forget. They're going into JV blind with no data. So even if you trust someone, it could go awry if they don't have a system built to say, we're going to do this. So how many different JV partners did you have at that time when you got to like those 20 doors?
So I had my friend from college who invested in New Haven, one of his friends who became a mutual friend. And then we had 3 other people who were like in our network, people that we knew. So it was like maybe, I guess it was five people. And then on any given deal, it wasn't necessarily all 5. It might be like 2 of them or 1 of them or 3 of them or something. Yeah. And they like the deals were, I tried to make them as like cut and paste as possible. So all the stuff that we bought in Union City was below 300,000. It was like in that price range. Yeah. All 2 and 3 families. They were all like in need of some work, but not necessarily huge gut renovations. And the strategy was all just like Airbnb them basically. And like I would take a management fee. That was like how I got compensated for the management of it. But I didn't take any other like fees or promotes or anything for putting the deal together, like doing the renovations, anything like that. Yeah. And a lot of these properties, like I did personally, like, you know, like renovations, like I hung drywall, like I laid flooring, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Don't you think doing that though helped you, especially with the scale that you're at now that we'll get into? Like you really have to know the nuts and bolts, because I think what new investors are always saying is they don't know how much anything costs. So then they start to work on a project only to realize it costs 3 times as much as they thought because no one tells them the truth. Then you have to know like how hard it is to do something. So you know if you're getting screwed on the cost then later.
Yeah. And you have to know how long it takes to do stuff too. That's something that a lot of people just don't understand, how long hanging drywall would take or whatever. I tell that to a lot of people. Yeah. I don't necessarily recommend spending a lot of your time like doing construction work unless that's your passion, but definitely like my knowledge of it has been very helpful. I would say for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. So after you get the 20 doors, how did you eventually bump into Ryan and then start what we'll talk about also, which is the Atlantic City, where you guys are just going nuts? How did that all happen?
So I think similar to how you might have met Ryan, it was through Bigger Pockets. Yeah. So I was shortly after like the first place where I didn't know anything. I figured that I had to like get smart, I had to learn some stuff. So I quickly found Bigger Pockets and absorbed all of their podcasts and the forums, which I think are the most valuable part of Bigger Pockets. And I started posting about what I was doing in the North Jersey section. And at the time, there were not a whole ton of people that were investing in Union City that were on Bigger Pockets. There was like Jersey City people, and there were like Essex County people, whatever, but not so much like Union City, Hudson County. And Ryan was someone else who was very interested in Union City. He was investing in Jersey City. So we became friends. We were around the same age. We would have lunch together every once in a while to kind of compare notes. He was doing flips. I was doing buy and hold basically. So we each had our own like distinct set of experiences, but commonality in the same form of real estate. So we decided 2017-ish that we would form a construction company, which I do not recommend doing.
Yeah,
and
he said the same.
Yeah, I would caution anyone about that. But we decided that we'd form a construction company to handle his renovations for flips and then my renovations for buy and hold stuff. And again, it was like my stuff was not full gut renovations, and his stuff at the time with his flips was like he'd done one big like full gut, but he was focusing on like more like lipstick type stuff more so than like all mechanical. I didn't end up that way, but that was that's the initial premise. And so we started that again, not knowing anything about like how a construction company is run or whatever else. I would say the construction company was a humongous waste of money and time and effort.
Well, what was the number one reason why that was so hard? I think I know the answer, but I think it will help others who are like, you're scaling up in your job. So you think, oh, let me just build my own crew. But there's some problems.
Yeah, there are so many reasons. I don't know if I could name a number one reason. But
give us a few, because I think it will really help people understand how difficult it is.
The top reasons are that like if you're on the other side, if you're like an owner of a property, like what you want to do as an owner of a property is basically get the cheapest labor that you can, the cheapest work that you can that is timely and meet your quality standards. So like for all of the subs or GCs or whoever you contact as an owner, it's a race to the bottom. It's like, okay, can you do lower than this? Can you do lower? That's the market that you're in. And the people that are the good people that are giving you numbers know what their actual bottom number is. Like they know, this is how much I'm paying for labor. This is how much I'm paying for materials. This is how much my overhead is. This is what my profit is. Like they know that number. But if you've never done that before, you have no idea what that number is. Like there's no way. Like, I mean, if you say, okay, I'm going to renovate a kitchen. Okay. I can figure out like how much, maybe I could guess how much cabinets might be. Maybe I could guess how much countertop could be, that sort of stuff. But how long is that going to take? Like even if I'm paying guys every day, like $180, $200 a day, like how many days is that going to be? Like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? And what about the other complications? I need to do new electric, right? I need to put in some outlets. I need to move an outlet. I need to do some plumbing. Well, how much is plumbing going to be? I don't know. So like you put together these numbers and then like you might be off by 30%, 50%. And if your margin on that is 10% or 15%, you're lost a lot of money. So not only that, like the timing aspect of it is that, again, the guys that are good at it, they know, hey, I'm doing my kitchen renovation. Okay, I got to get my plumber in there on day 3. I got my electrician on there day 6 or something like that, right? And so I need to call them 2 weeks in advance to make sure that they're ready on day 3. But if you've never done that before, you get to day 4 and you're like, oh, I got to do the plumber. Now the plumber is 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out.
Yeah, and then some stuff needs to be done by the plumber to move forward to finish your bathroom. You can't close the walls until you have that done. When Jenny and I started, we had contractors, and I think at first both of us allowed them to use their subs. And then we were like, we're losing money on this. So then we would get the subs, but then the subs would fight with the contractor. So now there's no GC anymore. We're the GC without the GC license, and we have subs for everything. And Jenny maintains the schedule exactly. So we're like a rocket ship comparatively, because we know when everything needs to be done. And we're just putting the pieces in. So I do think, because if you don't plan that, you could just be on a stop for 2 weeks and then no one wants to come back. Everyone keeps saying, hey, they're not done. They blame it on each other. Yeah, you need to have that experience, because if you're an owner and you're just hiring a GC, you're not going to get insight into like, when did the GC tell his electrician that he needs to come and do this? Like you don't know that. He just shows up one day. And a lot of GCs themselves don't do this well either. Oh, the worst. Absolute worst. Yeah.
So for many, and we were really doing our own projects. Like we did some third-party projects, but that was like a total disaster. Even for our own projects, it was like we would be way over our budget. We'd be more expensive than even if we had just hired out a GC. We'd be late. Yeah. And it would be like a lot of our effort and time. So like after the end of a project, we'd be like, this is crazy. Like we could have done it cheaper, faster, and with much less effort if we just wrote a check to somebody. So so don't start a construction company. I'm not give a background unless you know what you're doing. Like now it's been 5 years since we still have the construction company, and it only does our own projects at this point, and we sub everything out more or less. But now we know like all those things I just said, like we know what to do now. But it took 5 years to figure it out, losing a lot of sleep and money and effort and like whatever else. I mean, it was a lot. But I'm very thankful for that, because that's what led to working with Ryan and these other capacities that are actually fun and lucrative. And, I like to do now.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Atlantic City. So obviously, John and I have both been referring to Ryan Goldfarb, who was our guest on episode 11, uncovering your real estate investor thesis, which John also referred to. So give us a little bit. Ryan talked on his episode about Atlantic City and the details, but what's so attractive to what you guys are doing in Atlantic City? Soon you're going to be up to 100 doors in Atlantic City. How did that become so attractive to you? Because I think Ryan said you were the first person to be there before he was there.
Yeah, similar to my story about how I got involved in Union City, how I got involved in Atlantic City was not particularly purposeful. Another Bigger Pockets friend of mine had gone to college in Philadelphia, and he had gone to Atlantic City on the weekends during college. And he bought a place in Atlantic City just for him and his brother and his friends, just to hang out. Yeah. And so he invited me down there one weekend just to hang out. And I started asking, like, how much did you pay for the place? And he said, like, 100K or 150K or something like that. It was like a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, maybe 3 blocks from the beach, something like that. I'm like, wow, that seems really cheap. I knew the reputation of Atlantic City, but I was like, that's not really cheap. And I said, you're not here all the time, right? You don't live here. What do you do when you're not here? He said, I rent it out on Airbnb, which I was very familiar with because that's what I was doing in Union City. And I said, well, how much do you make? What do you make on a given night? And you rent it out? He said, $300, $400, something like that in the summer. And I was like, wow. So you're here like 3 weekends out of the year. Every other day you're Airbnb-ing it. Like, he'd only bought it a few months ago, but I was like doing the quick math. I was like, like, you bought it for 150K, whatever.
I see you having this a beautiful mind moment with all these numbers and stuff coming out of your head.
It's like he didn't even think, like, himself. And to his credit, he's now bought a lot more and is very successful. But like at the time, I think he didn't even really realize how crazy that was. And so I immediately said, like, we got to buy a place because I would love to have a house on the shore and also be able to make some money. And so within a few months, he and I had bought a place like almost across the street from his place, very similar numbers, same number of bedrooms, all this sort of stuff. And that was my first foray. And it was as lucrative as I thought it would be. It was like crazy lucrative. And so I very quickly wanted to buy a second one. I wanted to buy a third one. So we started doing that. And as I got more involved in Atlantic City and learned more about it, I think what changed it from just something that was like cool and like I could make a little bit of money on the side to like my full, basically all of my investing is there at this moment, was that I think, Atlantic City, from an investor perspective, assuming you're doing what I'm doing, which is like short-term rentals or leasing out, it's almost hard to construct a scenario in which you lose. So if you have two ideas, right? If you really like cash flow, then you'll love investing in Atlantic City because you can buy stuff really cheap. It cash flows insane because it's on the shore, short-term rentals, Airbnb, like whatever else. Like that argument is completely agnostic to appreciation, to the value of the house to begin. Like, who cares about that? Because you're just making cash. So if the house goes up, house goes down, who cares? You're gonna do great.
And you're buying so low, how can it really go down? It's like almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly. So that the one argument is cash flow. The other argument is you're buying this property for nothing. So if you have any sort of belief in Atlantic City, maybe, and many people do, I've come to believe in it. If you have any belief in Atlantic City's appreciation, if you look at any other Jersey Shore town, even on Muskegon Island, even Ventnor, like directly south of it, which is like way more pricey than Atlantic City. If you have any belief in that, then Atlantic City is a huge win. Because like at some point, right? I don't know when, but at some point, property values have to adjust in some way. So it's, which do you like? Do you like the cash flow? Do you want the appreciation? Because you have both, right?
Yeah,
so
and like your worst case scenario, though, is still nothing. The building burns down. You have the land that's a block from the beach. It's just, there's a no lose. I think just the reputation in general of Atlantic City was misguided. And people, if we're investors, like we need to look through that stuff. I don't want to deal on reputation. I want to deal on numbers. And scale and what appreciation and gentrification and what's going to happen. And I think that's where you guys, I don't know, I guess early to the party on doing what you were doing, because it operated as the casino area. But we learned during the pandemic when you guys really started to scale up there that like, no, that's accessible. Like for people in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, it's easy. There's a lot of stuff to do, but it also suits not just people who want to go to the casinos. There's a beach, like I think, shore.
Yeah, it became for me like a very simple supply and demand problem, because there's a lot of demand to be on the Jersey Shore. There's demand to be in Atlantic City too, because of the casinos and whatever else. And the supply of places to be there is not sufficient. There just are not that many there are the casinos, which some people like to stay in, a lot of people don't. And if you want to stay in Atlantic City and you don't want to stay in a casino, like there's not that much for you, you know,
Yeah,
like
and that's where I think the smartest dichotomy that you guys found is that Atlantic City is not a gambler's paradise. It's definitely a family place, just like Las Vegas became a family place. Atlantic City, if you do have someone who wants to hit the tables, they can go, and the rest of the people can go to the beach all day.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of food. Are there some areas that are a little sketch? Sure. Whereas they're not. All the places we've invested, there have been. I just think it's so interesting.
I say this not to brag, but I've never gambled a single dollar in Atlantic City. Like I've never put a dollar into even a slot machine. Like I've never done that. It just, not because I think it's wrong, but I just have never done that. And I've been to Atlantic City all the time. I go to the beach with my family. I go to great restaurants. I have a great time.
Yeah, so, it's great. And I think it's just good for people to learn about that they can find this also. Maybe you're not going to find a beach town, but I think people often too much are just following the herd on areas. And you seem to be someone who is ahead of that and using your personal experience, like how you get to New Haven because you went to college there. And that's what I think people are missing. I love Bigger Pockets too. And I love the forums. It's just like if you listen to the wrong part of it and you want somebody to tell you something, you'll hear it instead of just doing a little more work on your own and then finding this like almost the holy grail. So with Atlantic
City. The
City,
thing is, I looked at many other areas too. It wasn't like I didn't buy in a lot of other areas, but it wasn't like the way that the story maybe sounds is that, I just stumbled onto Atlantic City. I mean, I just literally said that, but it wasn't that. By this time I was much more analytical about like where I want to invest and all that. So it wasn't an accident that like we decided to go really heavy into Atlantic City. It was a lot. By that point, it was like very thoughtful and very intentional and very purposeful. And it was like, I had a big spreadsheet. I'm sure I could find it somewhere of so many different towns in New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, different factors that were important, rents. I looked at so many different deals, hypothetically, this and that. So it was like, it was purposeful. It wasn't, I said the story like an amusing way, but it was not like a joke. Like we were serious about it. And then once we got into it, it's like we became part of that narrative, which is really cool to me because we're part of rebuilding Atlantic City. Like
for sure.
We have all these cool projects and it's like, I can really speak like passionately about it. If someone's talked to me about Atlantic City, it's like I have so much to say. I'm excited.
I pointed everyone on Ryan's podcast to the episode of Brick by Brick, your guys' podcast on the case for Atlantic City, because that was the one that really opened my eyes. And then we talked about it when we did that Clubhouse podcast. But one more on Atlantic City before.
Clubhouse.
Yeah, I miss it too. It's just, it seems like a lot, but I may try it out again. One more on Atlantic City. I just want to talk about the 48 unit that you guys have under contract now, because I think that's a really interesting.
Yeah, we closed it. We just closed it.
Oh, awesome. Congrats. When Ryan was on, it was still there. Just give us a little info on that, because this has so much scale and it's such an interesting property. And it seems like you can only find this in a place like Atlantic City for the price and for the options that you have. So just give us a little bit on the 48 unit before we get to our questions.
Yeah, that's a wild project. That's something like out of our wheelhouse. So even in Atlantic City, we've been doing single family, small multifamily. I think the densest that we had is a 6-family right now. It's a building called the Renaissance or La Renaissance, if you want to be very fancy.
So fancy.
Yeah, it's not exactly on the boardwalk, but it's as close as you can get residential on the boardwalk. So it's like the building and then there's these little shops in front of it. It's been abandoned for at least 7 years, maybe longer than that. It was built originally, this is classic Atlantic City. So it used to be an amazing hotel back in the early 20th century, early 1900s. A huge hotel. I can't immediately think of the name of it, but it's a fabulous thing. It was demolished in the early 1970s, right before gambling. So they tore the whole thing down because Atlantic City had fallen in hard times, and don't need to go into the whole story, but bad times Atlantic City. Gambling was legalized 2 years later. So they had this whatever. They said, why don't we build a condo building right next to the casinos? It'd be great. So they built this condo building in 1980. It's everything you want to think about 1980 is this building. It's got the 1980s window, the 1980s side. It's just like 1980. It didn't work as a condo building. So they converted it to timeshares. It was operated as timeshares for a little bit. I think it was condos, timeshares, kind of like back and forth, always struggling, never that great. And then at some point, the whole thing went bankrupt. Someone bought out all the timeshare owners. I think there was something like, there were like 9,000 deeds because each timeshare would be a separate deed.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, that's a lot.
So there were like 9,000 separate deeds that were bought up, which I know about because we had to get title insurance. That whole process.
Yeah.
In its current state, it's 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. There's like a penthouse, 3 bedroom or something like that apartment. There's an indoor pool, which is completely destroyed on the top floor. It has amazing views of the Atlantic Ocean. Right up the
two
ocean.
broken elevators.
3 broken elevators,
Yeah.
2 passenger elevators, and a car elevator. Many things are wrong with it, but it's built as condos. So most of the mechanicals are separate, which is really nice. And the premise is basically we can renovate it piecemeal, and we don't have to do the whole thing because they're individual units. We can get like a floor operational.
Right.
And then opportunistically, we can do short-term rentals in some of the units. We can do long-term rentals. We can do student housing. We can do J1 visas for people working. We can be we have a lot of optionality with it because we have this great, building. We have a lot of these units, and we bought it at a price where we're going to be all in a fair amount, but per door, we're at less than $100K, more or less, for the unit. So it's even if you look at the worst condos in Atlantic City, which obviously we won't be, those are trading at a multiple of what we bought them for.
Yeah, and having it all condoized means, of course, you can sell them all individually long term. So your appreciation potential is just astronomical. And I love what you said, because I think diversification is so important. Like in portfolios, you have a building that can be diversified, even if you just consider it, say I don't know how many floors there are, but if you just separate it by floors and think, oh, Airbnb floor, full-time resident floor, just what you said, it's just such an interesting way of carving up a building, especially with the amenities that you have in the water. Yeah.
It fits into kind of what we're trying to do with short-term rentals going forward, which is we see short-term rentals, that idea as creating a new way for people to really live and to operate. So like the time of having a building where like the whole building is just apartments or the whole building is just commercial space or whatever, I think is changing to buildings where it's like there's a hospitality component, there's an owner component, there's a long-term rental component, there's maybe a medium-term rental, furnished rental, something like that. Like having that in one space, I think just opens up a lot, because people are, with COVID and with all the changes that have happened in the economy recently, it's like people are living in different ways. And so having a building where like you have to have 100 apartments, that's just what it is, doesn't really make sense anymore, because it's like maybe there's demand for that, but maybe there's also demand for 60 apartments. Yeah. I mean, 20 furnished rentals, 30 hotel rooms, and maybe that's how it works out.
You're creating maximum investor flexibility for the long term, because if you test one floor theory out, it doesn't work. You could just pivot to something else because of the way it's held. That's really exciting. What's your just guesstimate on when that's going to be operational, at least in some form?
Yeah, we're trying really hard to get at least some of the units ready for next summer, which I think will be a challenge. And right now, I think we've already we've owned it for all of 2 weeks, but I think we've already gone through at least 5 30-yard dumpsters and one 100-yard dumpster. I didn't even know there were 100-yard dumpsters.
That's a fun one.
Or maybe 2 of those. I think 2 of those, yeah. Because the amount of trash in this building is absurd. The previous owner was just an interesting guy, let's say it that way. But he had a bunch of stuff in this building that was destroyed. He had probably 50 mattresses, 50 couches, all sorts of stuff, and piled up. And you would think, it must be valuable, but it was all moldy, and stored in places that leaked. It just is crazy stuff. So it's all trash. And we're still throwing away furniture. We're not even into like drywall and kitchens and stuff like that.
That's awesome. I can't wait to follow along with that. Let's transition into our questions that we do on every episode. These I send to our guests like John beforehand, and then I'm going to read the question, give him his answer back, talk about it a little bit. So your greatest influence in real estate? Same answer from me. Yours is your dad. I'm not going to ruin all the good answers that you have here, but tell us why your dad, same as me, is your influence to get into real estate.
Yeah. So, my dad for me really embodies like the American dream. My dad is 93. So he was born in 1929, like beginning of the Great Depression, Italian immigrants. He grew up with nothing, bootstrapped himself to school and to podiatry school. He was a podiatrist for a lot of years, not particularly like book smart or anything like that, but I'm really good kind of like investing sense and all of that. And he was very lucky where he parlayed a lot of his money from real estate into like early Silicon Valley in the 70s and was really successful with that. And I think his kind of optimism and like entrepreneurial drive is something that I really identify with. It was always like any problem always had a solution. It was like he could always figure out a way to make money. And that's how I've approached real estate, is if obviously don't buy anything, but if you're smart and you're thoughtful, you can probably figure out a way to make money. That's been true, like with all of my investments. Yeah. He stopped investing in 1980. He made so much money. He just forgot about it. But he always talks about it when I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the interesting corollaries with him, my dad, you and me, is that we did the education to make sure that we had a backdrop so that we always did have something to fall back on. And I find that because of the proliferation of investing in general, there's people who just want to get into it too quick and think that investing alone is going to be a safety net. And it really doesn't work like that. It's very hard to do that. So like we try to encourage people, don't jump away from your job until you really have built like the
I think unless you're independently wealthy, it's super hard to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. We want to keep people safe. Most important trait for a real estate investor to have, I think Ryan might have said this too, perseverance. I agree. And you said things go wrong all the time. Why is it so important to just persevere through? Obviously, you can't give up, but I know this is deeper for you. You've been through so many different types of investments already. Yeah. Why do you think it's so important for that modern investor in order to stay mindful to have that perseverance?
Yeah, I think it ties into a little bit what I was saying before about being optimistic that things will work out. I think it's like, you can use the word like grinding or whatever, but if you keep kind of putting energy and effort into something, I've always found that there are often solutions that do not present themselves. I have so many stories about properties where I bought it and something went wrong, and it would have been very easy to say, I'm in trouble, but kept grinding, kept being optimistic, kept persevering, and then found a solution to it, whether it was like, have to get money from somewhere else or hire a new contractor we did in New Haven, we bought a project that we thought was going to be a great buy and hold investment. And that was the thesis, that was the whole reason we bought it. And then about 3 or 4 months in, we're looking at the street that we're on. Someone had died on the street, like on the sidewalk in front of the house. Oh my God, it's a terrible area of New Haven. And we put this money in and we thought like, we're running rents and we're like way off in our numbers. We're just like, we're screwed. And we thought, what can we do? What are we going to do? And we're like, what if we sell it as a flip? Like, what if we like fix it up, sell it to another investor? We market it that way. And it was great. Like we made money. Like we made a lot of money on that project in itself. And so that was like, it would have been very easy to say, I got to swallow the loss. Just got to rent it. Got to wait for rent to come up. Just got to swallow it. But we were like grinding. We're trying to think, calling people up. Hey, is there a market for this? And when we buy it, we just bought it 6 months ago. And we made, I think we had to say to put money in. We probably sold it for like 200 more than we bought it, 250 more than we bought it or something like that. So it was great. Like we did, it was a fine return for us.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh boy, I agree with this one. What is wrong with the real estate investing world right now? You said too many get rich quick gurus attempting to profit on the naivete. Yeah. That's why this podcast exists and yours too. We want to help people live more mindful. What do you see in the guru space that's abhorrent to you? Because I agree completely and I'm always railing about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like real estate has this cachet where, it's this, people know that there's money to be made in real estate. And because of that perception, I think that breeds a culture where you have people preying on other people to sell them BS, basically. I mean, certainly there are some valuable gurus, we want to say there's tons of valuable information online. Most of it is free. Almost all of it is free. So I think, unfortunately, like any other industry, like the affiliate marketing or whatever you want to say, where there's all these like gurus that like, here's how to do it, here's how to do it, here's how to do it. Like really the only way to learn how to do it is to think about it, read about it, talk to people about it, and then do it. That's it. Like you're not going to go to a course by some guru and learn how to be successful in real estate. It's just not going to happen. It might be somewhat helpful. But
what $50,000 class is going to tell you more than you could have learned on like Bigger Pockets podcast and this podcast?
You know this yourself, but I spent $150K to go to law school. That didn't train me how to be a lawyer. Like it trained me how to think like a lawyer.
It's a great point. I was saying it also about getting your real estate license. When we were in law school, you learn law and then you go into actual practice and you interpret the law. So the law doesn't work exactly how it is. And I think it's the same for real estate. Yeah, you could I love the books from Bigger Pockets, but you can't just read the book and then think you're going to go do it. Just because you read the book on flipping houses by Jay Scott doesn't mean you can go flip a house. It means you have a good background. But like you said, until you go and see what happens, I can't just pull every wall that I want. The house is going to fall down. It's just so interesting. Yeah, I really worry about the gurus. You guys know that's why I started the podcast. I really like giving the stuff away for free because I feel like, same as you, I built so many relationships through Bigger Pockets, in-person meetups, talking to people. And that's where I think long-term, you're going to find the deals and get the best education and access to. If you have a friend, then you can go on their site when they're doing a flip and you can learn a ton just by that. Yeah, that's a great one. All right. What is one way we could all collectively make the real estate investing world better? This is right on. Share information about investing, be open and receptive to new people, new ideas, and realize that investing is not a zero-sum game. What do you mean by that last part? You said almost always not a zero-sum game.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, we talked about this, I think even on Clubhouse maybe, but like a lot of people have this idea of there are only so many deals to buy. And so if I buy a deal that you didn't get, that's my gain at your loss.
Right.
And maybe that's true in very micro settings, right? If I want this exact house on this exact street, maybe there's only one of those houses. But the real estate market is so big that like one person's success is not your detriment or vice versa. And I think that mindset is really destructive because you'll get into this position where you're just siloed, you're doing your own thing. Everybody's the enemy. You don't want to share any information. Everything's a secret. And I know people like that invest in real estate.
Too.
And
they're not successful.
Like, they're not successful. And maybe they've been successful in like small thing, like one thing was successful or like small areas, but
they're
people,
paranoid though.
Yeah. And people figure that out. Like the real estate community in any city is not very big. Like everybody knows everybody. Like in Atlantic City, like I know everybody and everybody knows who I am more or less. And so if there's somebody who's pissing people off, right, because they're being a jerk or they're like hiding information like that, like immediately, I don't work with that guy anymore.
Right. Welcome to wholesaling, right? And our biggest gripe about all the wholesalers, just in general, there are some good ones, is just that the information is just not correct. They're just trying to get the spread and it looks bad and then everybody knows and nothing sells and everyone's disappointed. Awesome. That's a great one. Here we go. Best book. This is a good one. The best book that you've read that influenced your career in real estate. This is not one people say a lot. This is a phenomenal book. The Millionaire Next Door, not the millionaire real estate investor, The Millionaire Next Door. Tell us why that one's so important. I love the stories in that book so much. It makes me think of my dad. Like my dad was just like that. Yeah. When did you read that book and how did it influence what you do in the business?
Yeah. I read that book right around when I started investing in real estate. So I think that was one of the motivations for buying a house was that I started to get more interested in personal finance, just in a general sense, not specifically in real estate. But I think it really opened my eye to that there's a lot of like humility and humbleness that comes with that many people have who are very wealthy. And just because you drive a fancy car or have a big house or whatever, doesn't necessarily, that's not like a beacon of success. That just is, you have a fancy car. Yeah. Maybe you're successful, but could
be leased.
Could be leased. Yeah. So like for me, it was like whenever I tried to do investing, whenever I think about investing, it's like thinking about being humble, being thankful, being appreciative, like giving back and not being boastful about it. Like something that's really hard for me is to really even just talk about what I'm doing because I have that kind of, I really shouldn't like peacock, right? I shouldn't like say what I'm doing. And it's necessary too, because you want people to help you out and whatever else. But I always think about being humble, being thankful, and like being the millionaire who no one really knows like what they're doing.
That's everyone in the book, right? That's like the whole point of the book is they didn't live above their means, really. They just lived the way that they wanted. And I have nothing against people who have like sweet houses. I like sweet houses too, but like
I like nice cars too.
It's more what you said. Are you trying to show that as an indicator that makes you feel more worthy, or do you just have that?
Yeah.
Because it's
for me, it was a lot of like, I hustled. Like I lived in basements. I lived in that, that's the story about living in the basement in Union City. I lived there for 3 years. And like, it was
that's a long one.
Yeah. It was like, I remember my wife said that for her 30th birthday, like what her birthday wish was to live above ground. Like that was like,
I remember you said
that was her goal. So it was a long time. And like, not to brag, but we both went to Yale. Like we're both attorneys. Like by that point, like my wife was making money. Like we could have lived in a nice house. Like we could have done all sorts of stuff. But we chose to hustle, save our money, invest our money, all that sort of stuff. And that was like, I think the big inspiration was that book because you don't like, just because we can afford to live in a nice house and buy a nice car doesn't mean that we have to or we should. And like, why don't we put our money in investments? And now 6 years later, it's paid off. So.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, wrapping it up, this is the one thing I like to ask at the end. This is really important for new investors and investors who are on their way. You have a lot of experience in 7 years. What's the best piece of advice that you would give to brand new real estate investors, how to stay mindful as part of their investing journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the piece of advice that I tell everybody when it comes to my meetups and like whatever else is that are thinking about investing in real estate is to do it. Like just buy the house or do the deal or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And do it with what we were talking about before, a sense of like humbleness and humility and openness, and like it's a two-way street. Like the whole community is interconnected. But at the end of the day, like you just have to do it. Like you can think about it, you can read about it, you can talk about it, you can do analysis. A lot of people in my world fall into the analysis paralysis trap, where it's just like spreadsheets and numbers. And oftentimes like they don't even know what the numbers mean or
Exactly.
how they work together. And so you're just doing these spreadsheets, run these numbers, and these are meaningless. I can look at them because I've now done it for a while and like maybe blend some of my thoughts to it. But at the end of the day, if you want to do what I'm doing, like just do it. Like you're not gonna do it by formulas on a spreadsheet, and I say that as like someone who has like fancy educational background and like I can do all the spreadsheets, but it's like, that's the only way you're going to get the experience. So it ties into even what we were saying before about gurus. You're not going to learn it by paying somebody money. Like you're just not. You have to do it.
Your advice is right in line with what I say, because I always say you get into analysis paralysis because you're crunching 20 deals. How many have you seen? Everyone always says 0.
Right.
So like just do it. Is go see. You don't be making offers till you can see properties. Then after you've seen enough properties, you're going to have more confidence to make that offer, and then use the spreadsheet appropriately because what this amount of money smells, feels, looks like in person.
You said it too. It's go out and be at the property. You don't necessarily have to invest in your backyard, but go there, see the property, meet the people, touch the asset. That is so important because like you'll just like a lot of my success in real estate has been like I was there and something happened. Someone talked to me. I met someone. I just had this interaction, which I can't do in a spreadsheet or on email. Like I just had to go there, right? Some of my most valuable connections in AC happened because I just showed up to a lunch meeting about something completely unrelated to what I was doing and just met someone, right? Just there. But I was just there because I was looking at real estate. Like I was just there, and that turned into something great. So if you're not there, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Awesome advice. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Email is great. So my email is John, JOHN @libertyhudson.com. Liberty like freedom, Hudson like Hudson. And Brian and I have our own podcast as John. So it's the Brick by Brick podcast, Brick X Brick podcast. We actually haven't been super active over the summer because I had a baby, but we're recording some episodes actually coming up.
Awesome. But bring me back on. I have been a guest on that podcast. I'd love to come by again. Really we will definitely link to that. And your company's Liberty Hudson Capital, but you also have a couple other businesses off that, the Liberty Hudson Solutions at Bench Properties. What are those?
Liberty Hudson Solutions is our property management company. We primarily do our property management just for our own properties, but you can learn more about that management company there. Bench Properties is our consumer-facing brand for our short-term rentals. If you want to stay in Atlantic City, you can check us out there. We have a lot of affiliated businesses that kind of support our core mission of investing. But that's another thing too that we've diversified in, is like building out these other businesses as their own businesses as opposed to just.
That's smart. That's definitely something. Maybe I'll have you guys back together to talk about building your kind of, not necessarily like affiliate marketing, but affiliate businesses to support your own business. What you tried to do with construction, but now you have a different. The Airbnb game at your level needs certain support that you need to have in place that are going to be full-time and part of your staff to make it well.
You're running a business on top of real estate. That's really what it is. Yeah.
Fantastic. I really appreciate you coming by, doing the podcast. Before you say goodbye to everyone, just let me remind everyone this. I do this on the podcast. John knows this, just like Ryan knew it and I knew it. If you like our podcast, just do us a favor, share them with friends. I don't think any of us really want to just beg for you to like them, but that's what helps podcasts, is if you like it, leave a 5-star review and make sure that you send it to your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, you click the little button, follow it, give yourself notifications. But I really appreciate you coming on. This was a great episode. You and Ryan always provide such great value. And I'm glad that I know you guys. What's that?
You're a great interviewer, so it's a credit to you, of course.
I appreciate it. And I do hope people, if you're interested in Atlantic City, like John and Ryan are so nice about giving you information in an absolutely not trying to get you into a funnel type of way. They really are passionate about Atlantic City. And I think if you listen to these, you can find your Atlantic City somewhere else if you don't want to come to our Atlantic City.
Absolutely.
John, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it. Jonathan. This was episode 14 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. We'll see you next week.